Dan? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the March 27th, 2019 briefing session of the Utah Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining. Director Baza, welcome.
Thank you. I think we're ready to proceed, so I'll introduce myself again, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. John Baza, Director of the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining, and welcome to you and members of the board to your monthly meeting here in Salt Lake City. We have two presentations that you're going to hear this morning. The first is the annual report that we hear from Rio Tinto, Kennecott Copper Company, and talking about their reclamation activities at the Bingham Canyon mine. And to do that this morning is Trevor Heaton of Rio Tinto. And Trevor, if you want to come on up. You want to make sure you're speaking into the microphone. Trevor has been here before. He's a familiar face, and we welcome him back to give this report to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the board. I appreciate being here to talk about reclamation activities associated with the Bingham Canyon mine and permit M035002, which is the permit for the Bingham Canyon mine. All right. Like I said, I'm happy to be here, happy to present. This presentation is specific to what we call the 0002 permit. This is the permit associated with the Bingham Canyon mine, and we'll talk about the boundaries associated with that permit. In addition, we'll talk about a couple of other facilities that Rio Tinto Kennecott owns and operates. But the main purpose of this presentation is specific to the 0002 permit. A little background regarding Kennecott. The Kennecott Bingham Canyon mine has been contributing to Utah's economy for over 100 years. It's a top producing copper mine. It's the second largest copper producer in the United States. It's responsible for nearly 25% of U.S. copper production, and it's produced more than 19 million tons of copper in its 115-year history. Rio Tinto purchased the Bingham Canyon mine and its facilities in 1989. Rio Tinto is headquartered in London, and it finds, mines, and processes mineral resources throughout the world. Has operations that span the world with 48 mines and processing facilities in 35 countries and across 6 continents. Consistently, Rio Tinto is in the top 3 global mining companies based on sales and market cap. Its North American activities include mine sites such as Boron and Resolution. It manages commodities a diverse array of commodities, commodity diversification such as aluminum, copper, diamonds, energy and minerals, energy and minerals such as coal, uranium, titanium dioxide, borates, salt. It also manages operations dealing with iron ore. Purpose of this presentation is tied to the permit associated with the Bingham Canyon mine. The Bingham Canyon mine is tied to a 1978 contract. In past years, this presentation, typically during this presentation, we've given a detailed report of the preceding year and discussed what reclamation plans would be forthcoming into the future for the forthcoming year. Beginning in last year, however, we not only focused on our 2018-2019 activities, but we also discussed the 1978 contract and the Bingham Canyon Mine in terms of the broader picture. We'll discuss key components of the 1978 contract, but we'll also talk about some of the other newer permits that Kennecott operates under, and some of the other facilities that they operate under. We'll discuss the 40-year reclamation history, but with an emphasis on the last 20 years. When Rio Tinto purchased Kennecott, there's been significantly more reclamation associated with its activities. And then we'll talk about 2018 activities, so the activities over the past year and the spending associated with reclamation, and plans for 2019 and beyond. This discussion about the 2018 activities and setting forth a reclamation plan going forward in the future is tied to contractual obligations that we have associated with our 1978 contract to report on these activities and to set forth a reclamation plan going forward. So the 1978 contract. The 1978 contract is financial assurance for the 0002 permit. A written contractual agreement was a permitted form of surety from 1975, and it remains so today. In addition, we also have separate financial assurance instruments that exist for our other 5 DOGM permits. We also have external third-party assurance instruments that exist for some of our facilities associated with EPA and Salt Lake County Health Department. But what we're discussing today is the 0002 permit. This, the contract with the board that we discuss in terms of the 1978 contract constitutes the financial assurance instrument for the 0002 permit. And the 0002 permit is what you see here outlined in red. This is the permit boundary. It deals with some of the historic mining operations and how things looked in 1978. Shown on this slide is the disturbance associated with Kennecott activities, not necessarily the 0002 permit. So these are the areas that have been disturbed throughout the years, either from historic mining activities or Kennecott mining activities. And you can see Bingham Canyon Mine to the left, north is to the right. The tailings impoundment is to the north. Also the smelter and the refinery operations are there. Just north of the Bingham Canyon Mine is the Barney's Canyon Mine operations. And right in that vicinity is the Copperton concentrator. And off to the west is the Pine Canyon facility. These facilities shown in blue are outside of the 0002 permit. The North Tailings Impoundment has its own permit and its own financial assurance, third-party assurance associated with it. The smelter and the refinery are not governed by the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. They're secondary process facilities and are not governed under those regulations. The Barney's Canyon Mine has its own financial assurance, and it's a separate permit. The Copperton concentrator has its own third-party assurance, and it's a separate permit. Same with Pine Canyon, separate permit, separate third-party assurance. In 1992, Kennecott reclaimed the Bingham Creek area, an area dealing with historic operations not associated with Kennecott operations. We'll talk more about these in detail, but I just want to do a quick walkthrough of some of these disturbance areas and how they stand today. In 1994, we reclaimed the South Jordan evaporation ponds, which in later efforts turned into further reclamation and creation of the Daybreak community. From 1992 to 1994, so around the same time frame, we reclaimed the Lark tailings and waste rock areas. We've reclaimed numerous areas, a number of miles of railroad segments, including the Copperton Highline Railroad. Between 1996 and the early 2000s, we reclaimed the Bonneville Crusher, North Concentrator, and the Arthur Mill. From 1998 to 2003, we reclaimed the South Tailings Impoundment. From 2006 to 2012, we reclaimed 150 acres in Lower Bingham Canyon. And from 1995 to 2002, we reclaimed much of the Barney's Canyon mine. We have separate financial instruments for each of these areas. And so if we look back here, you can see the different facilities that we have and the areas that have been reclaimed. As you notice, we have separate financial assurance for the areas that we've talked about. And so the main part of the disturbance associated with the 0002 permit is really associated with the Bingham Canyon mine. And this is the disturbance that is tied to the self-guaranteed surety and the 1978 contract. So this is the clause in the 1978 contract that discusses the personal guarantee associated with the 0002 permit. Basically, the contract states that the board, in lieu of accepting the posting of a bond or other surety, accepts the personal guarantee of the operator to reclaim the land affected in accordance with its approved reclamation plan. That is tied to this disturbance. Now, we recognize that areas that we've reclaimed, that we've discussed, that there are, there's reclamation enhancements that need to be done, and there's operations and maintenance associated with that. But the areas that are unreclaimed and that really require disturbance, much of this area that is associated with the 0002 permit is really tied to the Bingham Canyon mine. So this slide is kind of a quick overview of the history of the 0002 permit and the history of Kennecott operations, how the 1978 contract has performed over the years. You can see each of these disturbance areas, and I'll quickly go through each of these areas to talk through these areas that we have reclaimed, and then we'll discuss areas that we plan to continue to reclaim. And Kennecott is committed to ongoing reclamation and concurrent reclamation throughout its operations. As we reclaim and as we mine with the end in mind, and we perform concurrent reclamation so that we can continue the full life cycle of mining. In 1992, we reclaimed the Bingham Creek tails. So, like we said, Rio Tinto purchased the Bingham Canyon mine in 1989. And right away, we worked with the EPA and with the state to begin reclaiming some of the historic facilities not associated with Kennecott operations. We cleaned up multiple sites. One of these sites was the Bingham Creek tails, where early lead miners contaminated portions of Bingham Creek. In agreement with the EPA, we undertook what was called the Alternative Superfund Approach to clean up the Bingham Creek tails. And the Alternative Superfund Approach was developed because of our efforts to voluntarily clean up these areas, and it became a template for doing similar work into the future. In 1992, from 1992 to 1994, we reclaimed approximately 475 acres. We removed 2 million tons of contaminated waste rock associated with historic operations. This waste, we removed waste generated by an unrelated company, and this 2 million tons of waste rock that we removed contained lead from historic mining operations near the town of Lark. We completed the final stage of site reclamation in 1994 to return the area to wildlife habitat. You can see the before and after picture. In 1994, we began reclamation of the South Jordan evaporation ponds. Historically, there were 25 evaporation ponds between the mine and South Jordan City that held flows diverted from mining operations. In 1994, we moved material from the ponds to permitted repositories and waste rock disposal areas. We excavated the pond sediments and placed them in the 200-acre on-site repository. Later, in the mid-1990s, we began exploring opportunities for land development on our land. The former evaporation site that we're talking about became a prime candidate for this land development. We removed the waste repositories. We developed Daybreak, a 4,000-acre planned community where the evaporation ponds once were. Daybreak was designed as a model of environmentally and socially responsible growth. We were the first developer in the United States to achieve the prestigious ISO 14001 environmental certification. And Daybreak is one of the best-selling master plan communities in the country. From 1995 to 2002, we reclaimed a large portion of Barney's Canyon, claimed approximately 120 acres. Part of this, 6 million tons of sulfide-bearing rock were moved to 2 repositories. This is showing one of those areas. We implemented waste rock cleanup in Barney's Canyon in 1994 when studies showed that the waste rock needed active management. The waste rock was categorized by sulfur concentration and sent either to the oxide dumps or to sulfide repositories. These repositories cover over 15 hectares out of 240 hectares of waste rock dump footprint. And then thick store and release covers were constructed on the repositories. In 1996, we reclaimed 20 acres of the North Concentrator. We demolished structures to grade or below grade. We removed below grade concrete and recovered and recycled asphalt. In 1996, we demoed the Arthur Mill and reclaimed the Arthur Mill area. Same year, we did the same thing to the Bonneville Crusher. 110 acres were associated with the Bonneville Crusher, 20 acres were tied to the Arthur Mill. In 1998, we reclaimed approximately 3,000 acres of the South Tailings impoundment. We had a successful primary revegetation effort, which on this portion of the impoundment assists tremendously to control dust. Now with the South Tailings, we acknowledge that there are areas that require operations and maintenance and reclamation enhancements, and we're actively working to enhance the reclamation that was performed on the South Tailings impoundment. In 2006, we reclaimed more than 150 acres of the lower Bingham Canyon. We covered reclamation areas with growth media. We planted thousands of seedlings and we're experimenting with trees, shrubs, and grasses to find the best plants that would fit in with the natural landscape. It's interesting, the trees that we've planted, we didn't realize we would have such an issue with deer on the property. We have some very nice maple ground covers because the deer have come in and browsed the trees, and the trees just grow along the ground. But those are issues that we're dealing with. So with the 150 acres that were reclaimed, basically we took 200-foot tall angle of repose waste rock lifts and relaxed them to a 2.5 to 1 slope. Once they were relaxed, we were able to cap them and place a vegetative cover, reseed the capped material with a growth media. The capped material was placed, which consisted of a growth media, and then once the growth media was placed, we were able to reseed the area. So one of the clauses in the 1978 contract is that we agreed that we would be obliged to expend a minimum average of $50,1978 per year for experimenting on reclamation and also application of best available technologies towards rehabilitation of the land. $50,1978 equates to about $200,000 today. And so part of a big reason why we give this presentation once a year is to report on how we measure up to our obligations. So in 2018, we had three major reclamation activities that were tied to the 0002 permit to the Bingham Canyon mine. These activities are the East Waste Rock Reclamation Project. We perform waste rock reclamation maintenance on certain areas, and then we have the South Waste Rock Reclamation Project. On East Waste Rock in 2018, we spent $8.6 million. We spent $42,000 on reclamation maintenance, and then on South Waste Rock Reclamation, we spent $11 million. So roughly, we spent $19.7 million, which equates to $4.9 million in 1978 dollars. Another contract key clause is that we would give a detailed report of reclamation work performed during the preceding year. The South and East Waste Rock reclamation projects, we discussed this last year, and these projects are ongoing. Probably the most significant visual impact of mining in the community will be addressed by the East and South dumps reclamation projects. Going back to this picture, in this picture you can see some of the legacy dumps that were placed there. These were placed decades ago, and they were placed not with reclamation in mind. The dumps, you can see the legacy dumps. They were over 1,000 feet tall, and because you're pulling waste rock out of the center of the mountain and exposing it to air and water, vegetation is not going to grow on the waste rock. But because they're placed so tall and because they're at angle of repose, you also can't effectively place topsoil on these dumps. If you place topsoil on, dump it over the edge, it'll just fall to the bottom. So the South and East Waste Rock reclamation projects, as we've discussed before, utilizes the concept of placing additional waste rock in front of the legacy dumps. Once this legacy waste rock is placed in shorter lifts, and the lifts are placed with a reclamation plan in mind, so that we can effectively regrade the waste rock to an acceptable slope. And once the waste rock is regraded, we can place capping material on top and revegetate the slopes. It's kind of interesting when the waste rock was placed associated with the legacy dumps. You can see the legacy repose waste rock slopes. When they would place it, all the boulders would fall to the bottom of the dumps. And these boulders would provide air ingress pathways into the dumps, which would allow air to enter, and that coupled with the water could increase acid rock drainage depending on the geology and the makeup of the waste rock repositories. As we perform these reclamation activities, we effectively cut off those air ingress pathways, and it helps us with managing water and with the impacts of acid rock drainage on our dumps. Here you can see some of the work that has been done. Effectively, like I said, you place waste rock in front, you relax the slopes, and then you place capping material. You can see the weathered material on the top are the legacy dumps, the legacy waste rock piles. And then just below that, you can see the relaxed slopes that have been placed. And then the dark brown material is the growth media that is placed to allow vegetation to grow. And the growth media is placed approximately to a depth of 3 feet, 3 feet or a meter, right around that range. Here you can see the stair-step placement of waste rock. Once again, you can see the weathered legacy waste rock slopes. You can see the new waste rock placed in front. The waste rock is then regraded to an acceptable slope, and then growth media is placed on top. So essentially the concept is you have this visible impact of mining to the community. And as we reclaim the areas, then it significantly mitigates the visible impact of mining on the community. And then here are some of the areas that would be reclaimed. Some other activities associated with reclamation on the associated with the 002 permit has to do with some work on the South Tailings impoundment. So on the South Tailings impoundment, we've reclaimed approximately 162 acres that were impacted by a construction project that took place on the South Tailings impoundment. We had a pipeline that was installed. The pipeline was installed, and we reclaimed the areas that were disturbed. Outside of the 002 permit, so this is kind of outside the main purpose of this presentation, the Barneys Canyon mine, we're actively reclaiming the Barneys Canyon mine. Barneys Canyon is a gold operation that has been closed, and we are now closing the remaining portions of the mine that were not reclaimed back in the early 2000s. So we're reclaiming the heap leach pad area. We're buttressing the pads and regrading them and relaxing the slopes on the pads. We're extending the liners to make sure that we capture the contact water that might fall on the pad areas. We're picking up the mine impacted soils that are associated with operations of typical mining operations, and we're placing them in the appropriate areas that they need to be in. And then once all the areas are regraded and reshaped and a capping material is placed on top of the heaps, then they'll be revegetated and you'll have a native habitat growing. Another key clause in the 1978 contract is that we agree to establish an annual reclamation plan for each forthcoming year. And so I'm here to present what we plan to do this coming year in terms of reclamation. So we plan to continue the South Waste Rock reclamation project. We'll continue to relax the slopes that have been placed. We'll cap, we'll vegetate, we'll install stormwater management structures, and then there'll be a number of test plots that we'll continue to manage or monitor to determine the performance of vegetation. We'll be doing similar work on the East Waste Rock reclamation areas. We'll continue to do concurrent reclamation on the North Tailings impoundment. And then outside of the 002 permit, but because we've discussed it, we'll also continue the Barneys Canyon reclamation, where we'll continue to relocate impacted soil, we'll continue to regrade the heaps, install the cap, vegetate, and demo any remaining structures that are not to be used post-mining. These are just some of the activities that we're doing this forthcoming year. So continuing the South Waste Rock and East Waste Rock projects and continuing with the Barneys Canyon heap leach closure. One last thing, I had included this slide in last year's presentation. We're continuing to perform studies on our reclamation and trying to develop our understanding of what reclamation will be in the future and what kind of activities will take place. These pictures here are rotary drill rigs, and but some of the activities that we've done activities with a sonic rig out on some of the dumps. And what's interesting is on one of our holes, we've set a world record for the depth of the sonic rig. We've drilled a world record for depth into a waste rock pile where we've drilled down to 900 feet. And we could have continued to drill, but we were exceeding the pullback capacity of the rig. And as we're doing these studies, we're installing monitors to help us understand how what the oxygen profile looks like in the waste rock repositories, understanding what the moisture content looks like, understanding what kinds of things are happening, so that we can better plan for reclamation in the future and for the full life cycle of mining. That as we continue to mine, we'll continue to reclaim and perform concurrent reclamation. Any questions?
Thank you. We're going to have some questions from the board, and then if there are any comments or questions from the public, we'll take those at the end of this briefing session. So any board members? Rich, we'll start with you.
Sure. For the 2019 plans, how many acres do you think will be reclaimed as part of those efforts you were highlighting for this year?
Yeah, so for the East Waste Rock, I don't have any exact acreage for how much we plan to reclaim. But for the East Waste Rock Reclamation Project, we're doing what's called Phase 1. And that'll take all of 2019 and possibly into 2020. But we plan to reclaim the portion that is the triangle that is underneath the access road as you drive up to the mine. I don't have off the top of my head what the full acreage would be for that. For the South Dumps Reclamation Project, we've planned to finish Phase 2 of the South Dumps Reclamation, which means we would continue into the drainages to the south. So we'd continue Olson and Butterfield drainages. And right now we're continuing to salvage topsoil in those areas, and placing waste rock, regrading the waste rock, and bolstering the waste rock in those areas for reclamation. We plan to complete Phase 2 this year of the South Dumps, and also so Phase 1 East Waste Rock we may finish this year. It may go into 2020.
Okay, thanks. I'm a little familiar with those projects.
Yes.
I think it does sound like a fairly significant effort. Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions? Susan?
You're obviously planting vegetation. What are you doing about wildlife management? You mentioned the deer eating your maples.
Not well. We've tried a few different things. I don't know if we have a solution for the deer eating our maples. We've tried little cages around the trees, but what we found is when the snow falls, it just knocks down the trees and the maples. And so we're working on that. Right now, what we're trying is just a plethora of plantings. So like at Barney's Canyon, we've planted over, a couple of years ago, we planted over 900 seedlings. And the idea is just to see if we can get them to grow, outcompete the deer. We haven't been successful yet, but we're working on it.
You allow hunting on your lands?
We do. Yes, we do.
Any more on the left? On the right, any questions? Thank you very much. We appreciate that presentation. We're back to you, Director Baza.
Well, thank you, Trevor. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Trevor. We appreciate your time, and particularly for the before and after pictures. I think those were very helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next presentation was something that was brought to us about a little over a month ago. You probably remember Brent Chicken, who's one of the attorneys who appears in front of the board, said that he was working with a party that had some interesting alternatives to gas flaring. And that's a matter that's been brought before this board several times as we start looking at the horizontal drilling activity in the Uinta Basin. It could be that gas flaring is one of the issues that we'll have to address. So Brent indicated that he wanted this company to present in front of the board, and we scheduled it for this briefing session. The company is now called Crusoe Energy Systems Incorporated, and today we have the president of Crusoe, Cully Cavness, who is here to present to you this morning. So once you're ready to go, Cully, I'll turn the time over to you.
Thanks very much. I just first want to confirm that we've got the presentation working. Okay, sounds like we're good there. Thank you so much to the members.
We don't see it on our screens yet, so can we just take one quick double check here?
While we're working on that, I just want to first say thank you to the members of the board and to Director Baza and his staff. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and share our technology with you. And it looks like we're getting pretty close to having this up and running here.
We do see the screen. Thank you.
Great. And thank you for helping set us up. So my name's Cully Cavness. I'm the president and co-founder of Crusoe Energy Systems. We're based in Denver, Colorado. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. But one thing I say about Colorado is that one of the best features of our state is Utah, and that we can come over here to Moab and mountain bike and spend a lot of time here growing up. And it is exciting to be back and sort of present to you in this capacity. So I grew up in an oil and gas family. I'm a geologist and have worked in oil and gas exploration. Most recently, I was a vice president of a company based in Denver that was exploring for the Niobrara Shale on the DJ Basin, and we drilled some horizontal wells and found oil and gas, and we dealt with our own challenge of flaring for a while before we had pipeline access. And that's in part where the idea for this technology came from, was what do you do about flaring? And especially as you get into horizontal wells, extended lateral wells with large amounts of oil production being the primary target, there's going to be a lot of associated gas. And in the absence of a pipeline, could there be a better solution than just burning it in the air? And so I'll be presenting today a technology that we've developed and we're actually operating now in the Powder River Basin in Wyoming that is an alternative to flaring. And we're hopeful that this could be something useful in Utah, in the Uinta Basin, and elsewhere. So I just want to start with a few photos. So I was in North Dakota last week and was having a conversation with Director Baza about North Dakota, and it's in some ways there's a lot to admire about the Bakken in North Dakota. There is. But one thing that is, I think, shocking, and even to members within the industry, is just the amount of flaring that occurs there. And I drove from Williston to Newtown, which is only about an hour drive, and I stopped counting flares after I got to 60. And you're never out of sight of a huge flame. And I would estimate some of these flames are multiple millions of cubic feet per day. And you can see in the bottom, what is obviously some kind of a hazy smog type situation. I know in Utah here you have your own challenges with non-attainment zones and smog and ozone, and 7 counties have non-attainment zones now in Utah. So when gas is burned like this, it is what we call uncontrolled emissions, and it does have its impacts. And so we were in North Dakota with exactly the same premise, which was to try to provide some solutions, some alternatives. And it's not that the operators don't want to find solutions, it's just if you're in a remote area without pipeline access, the economics can't pencil for pipeline, and there aren't a lot of other good solutions at this time. And so this was brought to a head in the press when this photo was released from NOAA, which ran satellite imagery campaigns over North America. And what stands out is obviously that the Bakken is brighter than Minneapolis. And that is because there are just so many hundreds, if not thousands, of open flames burning 24/7. In the United States, we flare more than 350 billion cubic feet of natural gas annually. It would be enough natural gas to supply 6 million homes with their natural gas needs. In Utah, I found some research suggesting the number was about 9.5 billion cubic feet of natural gas flared annually. So relative to the national total, I think Utah is doing pretty well, but that's still a big number, and hopefully we can offer a solution to bring that number down. And so, what is Crusoe Energy Systems and what do we do? So I'll spend a few slides here explaining what that is. Basically, we have a new technology that can convert this wasted natural gas into energy-intensive computing. The background on this is that many shale companies, they target oil, and natural gas is a byproduct. So the economics of the wells are driven by the oil production, the oil revenue, and in the absence of pipeline, it's economically the best alternative is to flare it, just burn it for the natural gas. But that is inefficient, it's environmentally harmful, and it's regulatorily problematic because boards such as yourselves are typically mandated to avoid waste as one of the primary considerations. It's a public resource, and we don't want to just burn it in the air to no beneficial use. So our technology achieves a beneficial use for the gas. It also reduces NOx and SOx and VOC emissions, which are those contributors to smog, because we run the gas through catalytic converters and emissions control kits as part of generating power. And I'll explain and show some photos about how that works. And we view this as an innovative solution that makes the oil and gas industry more efficient. And you might wonder, what is energy-intensive computing? And my partner is based in San Francisco and comes from a technology background. And it's been interesting spending more time out there, but all that venture capital money and private equity money going into all those technology companies in the Bay Area and across the country, it ends up being spent on spinning servers and graphics cards and all kinds of different computing equipment and a variety of specialized chips that power the internet and power all the apps on our phones. And more and more they power the sensors in the Teslas, communicating massive amounts of data from all kinds of cameras. And these are just a few of the buzzwords that are driving what is being called the tsunami of data. So you have virtual reality, augmented reality, blockchain, artificial intelligence. All of these things are massively energy intensive to compute, some more than others. And together with my partner, who's also originally from Colorado, we grew up and went to school together, and he's much smarter than I am. He went off to MIT, studied math and physics, and became really smart on technology, and I went off to the oil industry. We decided to approach this problem together. And so what we do, and what we have done, is we've developed a system for taking that stranded gas, and we generate power with it. There are a variety of power generation technologies and solutions available. This photo shows reciprocating engines. We just build a little gas pipeline that connects from this flare line to our power generation equipment. Then we install a data center, which we have a variety of designs and configurations, but basically it's a mobile portable data center, and we can set all this up in about 3 days once the components are on site. And then we have remote networking systems that we've also developed. So this is showing what we call the Crusoe satellite farm. It's 3 satellites, and we have some networking technology and software behind that makes it work well with our data center. And the combination of these components and some other components of the technology we've developed allow us to take large amounts of natural gas and convert it to computing and beneficial use in the oil field without laying fiber optic cable, without doing right-of-way for pipeline, without an upfront cost to the operator. And it's designed to be working in the oil field. And if any of you have been to Wyoming in the winter, you know that running one of these through the winter is about as good a test as you're going to find. And it's worked really well. We've been really excited with the performance so far. So like I said, we are operating today in the Powder River Basin. This is a photo of the operational system on the outside and the inside. This system is what we would call a half-length module. It was more of a demonstration project. It's already consuming about 65 to 70,000 cubic feet per day, and there are discussions to enlarge that. We can take up to 100% of the operator's gas, and we can take up to millions of cubic feet per day just by deploying longer modules or additional modules. It's very reliable. It's as reliable as a natural gas generator, basically. The computers themselves have been extremely reliable after we did a few, we had to do some shakedown stuff where we had to insulate some things because it got very cold in the winter, but basically it's working. And we have additional projects under development and some agreements signed for additional projects in Wyoming and Colorado and North Dakota, and would love to, help operators here in Utah as well. And the important point here is it achieves that beneficial use. It's avoiding just a blatant waste of a resource, and it is reducing those critical emissions that cause smog. So just key points, I suppose, to take away would be that from your perspective, we believe we can help facilitate regulatory compliance. You know, to the extent somebody asks for a very long-term flaring permit, you know, this could be an alternative if it's appropriate, and it might be something that's a win-win for the operator and for you. We do reduce those emissions again. It's very fast to implement. We can set this up in days once the equipment's on site. A few weeks of lead time. We need to source the equipment and manufacture some components. No upfront cost to the operator. We have a number of different service models that we can work through with the operators. There's no lengthy land acquisition or right-of-way process to negotiate, which is really what holds up a lot of the pipeline proposals. It's interruptible. If the gas supply shuts off, the computers shut off, but there's no critical loss of data. We're sort of designed for interruptibility. We want to be running 100% of the time, but understand that the workover rig is going to be there once in a while, and they're going to have to do hot oiling once in a while, and we can definitely work with that. So scalable from 40,000 cubic feet per day up to several million per day. No minimum drilling commitments, which is really big for the upstream producer. That's what also holds up a lot of the midstream, third-party midstream gathering agreements, is you basically have to provide a certain amount of gas or commit to a certain amount of drilling, and if you don't hit that level, you're penalized and have to pay penalties as though you had. And from a small company perspective, if you're doing exploration work, it makes it very difficult to sign up to a pipeline deal. And we believe we can bridge the gap there with an interim solution here. We can do this anywhere in North America, and we also have some additional benefits where we provide high-speed wireless internet and video monitoring on-site to the operator as part of the service. So compared to pipelines, it is fast and cheap and easy, and I would also say compared to flaring, it's environmentally preferable and resource conservation preferable in that lens also. So I was conscious of time. Hope I didn't go too fast or speak too quickly, but just again, bringing it back to Utah, I come from Colorado, and it's a state that has, it is very anti-flare at this point. We found a way to, I think, develop shales without ending up in a landscape full of fireballs. And I know Utah is mindful of fostering development of oil and gas, but also not wanting to end up in a landscape that is unappealing or with air quality that is potentially unappealing or harmful. And so what we're trying to offer is that win-win solution where you can allow people to keep drilling, you can approve their permits, but we can do so without long-term flaring and uncontrolled emissions.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. One of those, I hope, will be on royalty payments, if any. We'll start on the left. Carl.
What are your parameters as far as gas quality goes, nitrogen, H2S, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We work with some of the generation equipment manufacturers specifically to have rich gas designs if it's needed. And we've been able to work with gas up to 1,650 BTU in energy content, so that's quite rich. Sulfur is...
Interrupt you just a second. Board members, 1,000 BTU gas is basically pipeline quality. And so if you have it higher than 1,000 BTU, Susan can talk about this much more than I can, but if you have it higher than that, the homeowner turns on their gas stove and gets a flame about 4 feet tall. So they have to either enrich it if it's below 1,000 BTU or somehow take some of the liquids out and do other things to get it down to that 1,000 BTU level. So when he says 1,600, that's smoking hot. Okay, is that a fair statement?
That's correct. Yeah, methane, I believe, is closer to that 1,000. Pure methane would be closer to 1,000 BTU. And yeah, you're correct. Pipelines are typically 1,000 to 1,200 BTU. And if it's above that, what that means is you have propane or butane or pentane in the gas, and that's elevating the energy content in the gas. So when it comes out of the ground, it's got a mixture of natural gas liquids, and it's going to be typically hotter than that 1,000 or 1,200. So I guess what I'm saying is we've been able to deal with those more raw gas streams. And the engines do have parameters. They can't be highly contaminated with a lot of sulfur. CO2, I believe, also is a constraint, but so far we haven't found gas that's so extreme we haven't been able to work with it. These engines are actually really robust, and unless it was anomalous gas, I think we'd be able to take a look.
Thanks.
What's the low end BTU you can handle? About 800?
You know, I'm going to say it's probably that like 900, 1,000, that would be pure dry methane, I think, and the engines can run on that if they need to.
Next question, Susan.
What volumes of natural gas do you need to put one of these engines here?
So we
In other
can
words,
start.
one of the problems has been there's not enough volumes to build a pipeline, there's not enough volumes to do much with.
That's the beauty of this. It's very modular, and we can start very small. So we can start, there are engines that will take as low as 20 MCF a day. And the project we're running now, we started with just 65, 70 MCF a day. So that would never justify a pipeline, but it's plenty for us to get started with because we can do modular deployments. And then we can scale with the operator. So as they drill additional wells, we can add additional units.
A related question, how long would the flaring need to be planned for to justify, you know, bringing all this in if it's a short-term flaring? How long do you need?
That's a good question. Yeah, so we would look at situations longer than a year of flaring. In some cases, we could look at anything longer than 6 months. And so it'd be more for those long-term, what we call routine flaring requests.
One other question. You're reducing the emissions of NOx, VOCs, things like that by having a more complete combustion and by having the pollution control equipment. Can you give us a feel for how much it might reduce loadings in the atmosphere?
It is
A conventional flare?
I can definitely follow up with you with specific data on that, but it's pretty significant. It's to the extent that I guess one way to imagine this is if you were to ignite, gasoline in the open and you see what's coming out of that open fire of gasoline, and then you run it through a car with a catalytic converter, you don't see black smoke coming out of a car that's running well. And it's that level of dramatic reduction because it is fundamentally the same technology.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be a useful thing in your standard presentation.
Yeah, we have spec sheets on all that, so I can provide that.
If you would, we would appreciate it. Other questions on the left? Any follow-up? Okay, then we'll go to Chris on the right.
I hope I'm not out of line. I've just got two questions. Who do you sell your services to, your data storage services to, or can you tell us that?
Yeah, so I said I might be a little bit awkward answering some questions about our business model where it might be a little bit proprietary. There are a number of different commercial relationships where we're able to generate some value from the computing. And the important thing, I think, from the operator's perspective is that because we can generate value from the computing, it dramatically improves the economics to the operator because they don't have to pay to. The alternative would be if you were just generating electricity and running it into what they call a load bank, basically a big hairdryer, which I don't think would qualify as beneficial use in the first place. But even if it did, the cost of just generating that power without any value creation would be pretty prohibitive for the operator. And so it's that combination of or bringing in that value from the computing that we can offer.
I guess the second question is, if you really enjoy Utah, why not move your business here?
Well, who knows? Maybe we'll end up with an office here. I mean, if the Uinta Basin is a big market for us, that's not crazy at all. And we've certainly begun hiring people in Colorado where we see a market. So this is a labor-intensive, operationally intensive business. And I guess one feature here is that it is a job creator and an investment creator, certainly more so than just burning the gas in the air.
Gordon?
So my question might border on proprietary also, but who pays who? Are they paying, are you paying them for some of the natural gas, or are they paying you to get rid of it?
Sure. So it's actually a little bit of a mixture of both. And I was told that you were representing landowners and royalty owners, and so totally understand where the question is coming from. The typical model, and there are a lot of different variations we've worked with, and it is sort of a custom negotiation each time, but we will pay a fee for the gas, and it's not going to be competitive with pipeline by any means, but we try to acknowledge that there is that royalty component to the conversation, but there also is a service fee. And the balance of those two plus the term of how long the project's running for is really that those are three of the sort of most important economic variables that we work with on those contracts.
And this might be more of a question for the division too. How many scenarios do we have that fit this? Because typically a new well flares for a while, we get in a pipeline. How many situations do we have that would fit this where they need 6 months to a year to set it up?
One thing I would caution you about is, our history has shown that gas is going to be transported eventually in certain areas. I think we've got probably a situation down by Moab where we've had some long-term flaring for quite a few years. But in most cases, we've seen in the past that if you produce the gas, it's going to, even if you have to flare temporarily, it's going to get moved. But what we're seeing now is some of the horizontal drilling taking place is overwhelming the gas gathering systems out in the Uinta Basin. So it may be that as horizontal drilling becomes more popular or frequent, that we'll have much more gas than the gathering systems can handle out there. And systems like this would be more appealable at that time.
So, and just a sort of an analog from some other basins I can comment a little bit on Colorado and the Powder River Basin, and we're seeing it for sure in the Permian Basin. There would be sort of an initial discovery well or group of wells, and maybe there's some existing legacy pipeline infrastructure that can handle those volumes. And then, operators come in with real capital budgets and expect to drill high-density pads, and there's going to be a dislocation between midstream capacity and production volumes, and that has persisted for years in the margins of these basins as they expand. It takes years to permit and finance and build a big pipeline system, and it's those sort of expansion times and windows where we can be really helpful as an interim solution. So you don't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of just crazy amounts of flaring. We can come in and try to mitigate that. And eventually it will go to pipe, and it should go to pipe. We don't expect to compete with pipeline economics. We want to be there in the interim.
Can you give us an idea of what other states like Wyoming has done to implement your ideas, or are you just informing us, or is there a step that like Wyoming had to do or did do that regulatorily that was able to kickstart this in their state?
Yeah, so really, I'm here as it was a favor from Brent Chicken, and he suggested that this could be interesting for you all to know of as a solution, because you're often being asked to view and review these flaring permits, and so I just wanted to make the technology available to you and make you aware of this solution. In Wyoming, the rule there is, I might be speaking a little bit out of turn, but I think I remember it's 60 MCF per day. You can flare for any well. That's kind of the statutory level that an operator has access to. And then there are a number of exemptions or variances the operator can apply for. And the state doesn't really like to give those variances because their mandate is opposed to it. That you're not supposed to allow a lot of waste. And so the view there has been that operators can implement this, and it avoids having to go in front of the commission and ask for these difficult variances and ask for really relaxation of the rules that the board doesn't want to give. And I think it's just the interplay between those two dynamics is what's caused some adoption in Wyoming. But no, in terms of going in front of the board, we haven't really had a lot of dialogue with it's called the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission in that state, and it wasn't like they had to create a new rule or anything like that. They just, I think, they have existing rules that prevent flaring.
Thank you very much. Any second thoughts, board members? Any second questions? Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Kavnis.
Back to you, Director Baza.
I will cover just a couple of things before I turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman. One is that on our calendar, on April 11th in Duchesne, we have the Uinta Basin Hydrocarbon Conference, It's normally part of our quarterly meeting schedule that we do with the operators out there. And we've got a program that'll extend from 8:30 in the morning to a little afternoon. It includes some of the things we've done in the past on horizontal drilling. Chairman Gill is going to be moderating a panel on that very subject. And then we'll have some discussion about the Western Natural Gas Initiative, which is a partnership among several Western states in terms of moving gas out of the region. So we hope that you'll be able to attend. We can accommodate you with transportation if you need it. There's no registration fee, and Duchesne County is helping with a nice breakfast and some snacks while we're out there. So I would welcome you to come to that.
If you haven't been to one of these, it's really an interesting, informative overview, and I would encourage you to go if your schedules allow. Okay.
The other thing I'll bring up is that today we'll be having a working lunch to discuss the nominations for the Environmental Excellence Awards.
Thank you.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director Bozza. We appreciate all the good things that you've done, and I'm not sure you survived the legislature, but it's at least over.
And we will manage through it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time we would open our microphone for any comments from the public on anything that we've discussed today or on anything that's part of our jurisdiction. So if anyone would like to stand and come forward, okay, please come forward. We need to pick up what you say in the microphone for recording purposes, so we invite you to speak closely to the...
Does that work?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate being here. Just two things first before my
Please
comments.
identify yourself.
Sorry, Terry Marasco. I'm a board member for Utah Moms for Clean Air. I want to thank Chairman Gill for inviting me out to see some of the reclamation a couple of months ago to gain an appreciation of what Kennecott is doing out there, which I think is massive and I think is necessary, and we certainly appreciate that and appreciated that trip. And by the way, on a positive note, I've actually initiated a project with Kennecott to see if the tailings can be used to create a form of concrete instead of sand that can be used in construction. So the ultimate goal is to put the tailings to beneficial use in concrete production, for instance, road surfaces or buildings, et cetera. So that project is still in formation, and what has to happen, tailings have to be tested to see that they don't have too much, not enough silica or too much sulfites to be appropriate for this kind of use. But if it works, it could be massive. The other side of my comment is next week is the 10th anniversary of a letter I wrote to the board asking that the Bingham Canyon mine be bonded. So for 10 years, I've been approaching this board, talking to Roland about having that mine finally bonded. I understand the personal contract, but my analogy is you go to a home, you go to a bank, buy a home, and you don't just shake the banker's hand and say, give me the money. They want an asset, usually the house or some guarantee that they can fall back on. The Bingham Canyon mine doesn't have that. So I don't have much more to say to that than it shouldn't take 10 years to get this solved. And my understanding is at this time, I could be wrong, because I don't know everything going on in the background, that the board has not received from Kennecott any sort of asset claim of what they own and whether they have the financial wherewithal to deal with that mine when it's closed and the mitigation it would require. So 10 years is a long time. It's about time. And that's about all I have to say. Any questions?
I don't see any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank
Mr.
you,
Marshall.
Roland.
Appreciate it. Anyone else here to comment to the board? Seeing none, we're going to take about a 10-minute break, and when we come back, we will start on our formal agenda. And again, thank you all for being here today. We appreciate it, and for those that are looking in from the YouTube, we welcome you to continue to be here. Thank you.